imagine the scenario. You're driving to work, and someone cuts you off. You know how they do this, right? So you honk at them. You know, in your mind, you're saying all kinds of things that can't be said in church. Maybe the person flips you off. Now you're fuming, right? Like, he cut me off, now he's flipping me off. I mean, why do people have to drive like that anyway, right? Like, what is wrong with people? This is what goes on in my head. What's wrong with people anyway? Then you get to work, and the first thing you go to copy something, and the copier's jammed. And you're thinking, who was the last person that used this thing and didn't fix it, left it jammed, right? So your anxiety and your anger is mounting. And then your boss criticizes you for something that you didn't do. Even though it wasn't your fault, you're being held accountable and you're starting to get defensive, right? You feel angry, resentful, misunderstood. And you're getting defensive, you start trying to explain why it wasn't your fault. But your boss won't listen. This is starting to feel really unfair. You're beginning to feel like maybe the gods are angry with you today. Has that ever happened to you? Or maybe the stars are out of alignment or something is going on.
Mercury's in retro.
There you go.
You use the wrong aromatherapy. I don't know. All kinds of things could be happening. But it's starting to feel like everyone and everything is against you, right? How many people have had that day?
Oh, yeah.
I've had that day. I have that day often. But what if I told you that no one and nothing is against you?
Really?
What if I told you that in fact everything in your life is for you? What if I told you that even the things in your life that seem the most painful or the most challenging or frustrating are in fact designed just for you to lead you to your deepest healing and to your highest and fullest expression of individuality, creativity, and love? Well, it sounds kind of crazy, right? Like maybe a little far-fetched. So I hope by the end of this talk I will have convinced you that the challenges and problems and painful situations you encounter in life are not there to hurt you. They are not there to thwart you. They are not punishments for something you did. In fact, they are the universe, God, your higher self, choose the word that you like, adeptly, in fact, freakishly, accurately, pointing you toward the places in you that still need to be healed. Waking you up to what remains unwhole in you, so that you can become an ever more perfect expression of divine love, and so that God can use you as the vessel through which to more fully express divine love, which is what all of our purpose is on this planet. So when I heard the call to ministry about almost 4 years ago, I've shared in other talks that I was like, you talking to me? You know, like, there must be some mistake here, because I was thinking of all of my flaws, all of the issues. You know, I've done enough therapy, I know what my issues are, I can rattle them off. And I was thinking, but what about all this stuff? I can't be a minister, there's all these things wrong with me. And so, long story short, I made a pact with God that I would do this thing I was being called to do, but that God had to fix me. Now what that meant, it didn't mean that God was going to tap me with a wand. I knew I had to do the work, but it was an agreement that I made with God that I needed to be shown what I needed to do to clear out those things so that I could be effective as a minister. I gave God 3 years to do it. Because that's how long seminary was. Got 3 years, buddy. Get to work. Yeah, well, careful what you ask for. It started like, I think that day, the barrage of things coming at me. And I remember Vicki sent me this text, and she said, this thing's driving me nuts. And she said, everything that happens to you from here on out is going to be part of your ministerial training. And then I came to realize that, in fact, everything that had happened to me my whole life up to that point had, in fact, been part of my ministerial training. So, as I said, the moment I said yes to this call and made that agreement, the lessons began in earnest. Vicki was there, she recalls. And they were some really painful things. Those spiritual 2x4s that hit you, that bring you to your knees, that kind of thing. And even in the midst of dealing with some of those really difficult things, part of me recalled that pact I had made with God. And so I knew that this was all happening for my good. I mean, I'd given God permission, right? I'd given the universe permission. And the universe does not take that permission lightly. Beware. And so I trusted that I was being given a very personalized curriculum. And that each lesson that came was there to wake me up and call my attention to a place where I was lacking wholeness. A place where I had not yet healed myself. A place where I had become separate from God, or where I believed in that separation from God, where I had started to buy into that. And so Vicki was my awesome mentor, continues to be my mentor on this journey. And as I would come to her with these things, oh God, he said this and he did this and it really hurt, just so full of angst, and she would say, he's not doing it to you. You might feel like it, but he's really not doing it, or, she's really not doing it to you. They're doing it because of their own wounds, because of their own inability to be authentic, their own feelings of worthlessness. And then she said, no one and nothing is against you. I was like, what? When you're in the middle of something, those are hard things to hear. And plus, it didn't allow me to indulge in that self-righteous anger that had always been my comfort in those times, right? But deep down, I trusted Vicki. And some part of me knew that it sounded right. And I remembered that agreement I had made with God. And I cracked open the slightest bit to begin to believe that might be true, that there was no one and nothing against me. So many of you have heard me share about the process as you're going through seminary. The seminary is your coursework, but you also have to go through what we call L&Os, which is licensing and ordination. And it is a process of being interviewed by a panel of ministers a couple of times a year throughout your 3 years of seminary. And they ask you some pretty tough questions because they're really trying to dig in there and see, what's in there that could be a trigger for you. What could get you into trouble once you get into ministry? And so they really probe and they really get in there. And so I think it was my second L&O. So after you do your interviews with 2 different teams of ministers, you get a letter of feedback. And the feedback, tells you maybe some things you did well, but then it proceeds to tell you all the things you need to work on between now and the next interview. And so I think it was my second L&O, and I got this letter, and it was just, have you ever gotten something like that where just felt like such harsh criticism, and I was so kind of tender and raw at that point. And so when I got this thing, it was like a gut punch. Because it felt like really harsh criticism of me. And I spent that night in my hotel room crying, thinking I was not meant to be a minister after all, that this had all been some big mistake. Now, it turns out that I was not the only one crying in my room, thinking that I shouldn't be a minister. And so, as I kept, looking at this stuff, and started to try to understand it, I decided that the feedback that I had gotten was really not fair. That the interviewer had overstepped their bounds, that they were out of line, and then I began to tell anyone and everyone who would listen why these things about me were not true. See, I was mounting my defense. Because that thing that they had said to me had tapped that place in me that hurt so bad that I had to defend myself why those things about me were not true. And so I came home and talked to Vicki about it and other trusted people and, began to, the more I looked at the stuff and because of Vicki's awesome, gentle guidance, I started to be able to look at the things a little bit more. There was one particular bit of feedback that was really getting me. Have you had an evaluation or something and there's that one line that gets you, that one thing? Or, 20 people tell you you were awesome and one person tells you you weren't awesome and that's the thing you can't get out of your mind, right? There was this one line that was just really getting me. I kept coming back to that, but look what she said, but look what she said. And it turned out that particular thing, it was uncanny. That particular bit of feedback that was most bothering me was very similar to criticisms that I had heard as a child. And so it was tapping that place. In fact, it was so painful that I entered therapy, which was was required of me, but I'm very grateful that I did it. And I started doing a different kind of work, not cognitive behavioral, but a different type of work, really working on that pre-verbal cognitive programming. Basically the stuff that's in our subconscious that is operating all the time in us, but we're not even aware it's there and it's tripping us up. And so I began to see that these lessons, as painful as they were coming at me because it was time to dismantle those old false beliefs that were not true and that were no longer serving me. That early programming. And so the feedback that the interview was, the thing that feedback from the interview was tapping in me were limiting beliefs, false beliefs, that I was unworthy, that I was incompetent, that I was immature and irresponsible, all these irrational beliefs that I had picked up as a very small child. And so they were pushing the very buttons in me that needed to be healed. So when I tell you there's no one and nothing against you, how can that be true? Because it sure seems like life is throwing a lot of stuff at us, right? A lot of challenges. We get hurt. We get our hearts broken. We get let down by people, disappointed. We experience grief and loss. It can feel often like you're being attacked, like you're under attack, right? And yet no one and nothing is against you. Has it ever happened to you that someone, a friend, a coworker, someone says something to you with a tone of voice and maybe a look, and you go, oh God, what did I do? Are they mad at me? What did I say? Did I do something wrong? And you start this whole thing in your head, right? So when someone says something like that to us, we begin to assume immediately that it's about us, right? That's what we do. It must be me. I did something. We assume that we know what people are thinking. I hardly know what I'm thinking half the time. We assume that we know what motivates people. But our assumptions are 100% wrong. Our assumptions are 100% wrong. Why? Because we never have all the information. Okay, so here's how the lovely human mind works. When we don't have all the information, which is pretty much all the time, our brain fills it in with our own ideas. But do you think it fills it in with our best and healthiest and most spiritual ideas? No, we fill it in with all that stuff that's in our subconscious that is not healed in us. That's what we fill it in with. That's why we go right to, she must be angry at me. I must have done something wrong. We make it all about us. Everything that happens around us passes through the filter of our perspective. That, if you take nothing else from this, take that, right? Everything that is happening to us is passing through our filter of our perspective. But our brain tells us that it's the truth. And so, most of the time, it's not about us. It turns out that person had just gotten a phone call from someone that was dying, or they got yelled at by their spouse, or they lost their job. And that look that we interpreted as we must have done something wrong had nothing to do with us. But we've taken it on. So why do we do this? Why do we take things personally? Partly because of that process that I said is a normal part of how the human mind works. But usually when we react to something, it's because they've gotten us right where it counts. Right? That person is tapping into our stuff, our unhealed stuff. So we just did a 6-week class on this book, Eye of the Storm, that I'm taking this material from. And Mary Ann shared a story with us where trying to get the story right, but the gist of it is that she came home from, I think, elementary school or junior high or something, telling her mother that she'd been made fun of, she was being bullied or whatever at school. And her mother said to her, how's it go?
What would you say if they
What would you say if they told you you had a wart on your nose? Aha, that wart on your nose. And Marianne said, well, I don't have a wart on my nose. And her mom said, exactly. You don't have a wart on your nose. So why are you letting it upset you? So if there wasn't something there that they were tapping into, we wouldn't react, right? Think of something that's like not one of the areas that you don't have an insecurity, something you know you do well. If someone told Denise, you can't play the piano for anything, she'd be like, what are you talking about? Because she knows she can do that. But if I knew what her deepest insecurity was and I said that to her, then it would get her. And so the reason we do this is because there's some place, because we're human, where we're not connected to our wholeness. They're tapping into those unhealed, unwhole places. Because if we truly knew, if we were truly grounded in all of these spiritual concepts all the time, and we knew that we were perfect children of God, and we knew that we were never separate from God, that there was in fact no separation, then nothing would bother us in life, right? But then we'd be in Nirvana or some other place that's not where we are, right? We are on planet Earth and we're having a human experience. So we don't walk around with 100% understanding of those spiritual concepts all the time. It's just not the human experience. And so that thing that is triggering us is pointing us to where we need to be healed. It's saying, that's it. That's it right there. That's where you need to do your work. If that L&O feedback hadn't hit me right in a place where I have unhealed wounds, that place where I'm not connected to my own wholeness, that place where I have splintered, cut off from myself, decided that some part of myself was unacceptable because of what I heard as a small child, and learned to believe that, and repressed that aspect of myself into the shadow so that I was now disconnected from that part of myself, that feedback would not have affected me. So, this is how the universe is for you. Because that's the information that I'm getting from that reaction in myself. So it's like a roadmap on your spiritual path, telling you, this is the place you need to tend to. This is the place where you need to dig up that false programming that is no longer serving you. This is the place where you need to take that splintered off aspect of yourself, that I'm unworthy and I'm irresponsible and I'm immature. I need to take that part and I need to love it and hold it and embrace it and take it out of the shadow and into the light and begin to bring it back into my wholeness. So, not only is no one and nothing against you, everything is for you. Everything that is showing up in my life and in your life is for your highest good. If you believe that the universe is a loving, friendly place, and I do, and I believe most of you do, if you believe that there is only one power and one presence, and that everything is consciousness, and that this life that we are having here on this earth is the perfect setting for our spiritual growth and evolution of our consciousness, then you know that everything that happens to you is for you, for your ultimate spiritual growth. So I might not decide what happens in my life at all times. I can't control everything that's going on out there, but I can decide what it means to me. That's the power that we have. So when someone says something that triggers me, that triggers that place, I can choose to be angry, resentful, and defensive, mount that defense and tell anyone who will listen why it's not true about me, or I can go, oh, I see. That's one of those places. God is pointing me toward that personalized curriculum, freakishly accurate curriculum that is just for me and my soul's unfoldment. So the women of this church go every year to Land of Medicine Buddha. And this is a beautiful Tibetan retreat center. And they have, in the Redwood Forest, there is a path called the 8 Verses of Thought Transformation, or the 8 Verses Trail. And so I think it was 5 or 6 years or even more years ago, I was walking along the trail, looking at the redwood trees, and I came to number 6. And this is what it said. When someone whom I have benefited and in whom I have great hopes gives me terrible harm, I shall regard that person as my holy guru. Lord have mercy. Can you imagine? These Buddhists, I'll tell you. So instead of getting defensive and resisting, I can look for the lesson, the learning, the blessing in that situation. Can you imagine living that way? When someone hurts you or someone criticizes you, to see them as your holy guru. This person is playing a role. That's what Vic used to say to me. This person is playing a role. They're just playing the role of your teacher, pointing you toward where you need to heal yourself. So you can ask yourself when that happens, what unhealed part of me is this situation pointing me toward? Where am I still lacking wholeness? Where have I splintered off from myself? Where am I still believing in separateness from God? And then say, thank you, because you've received your next assignment. You know, we're not here to just work, eat, pay bills, watch TV, and go to bed. We're here for our spiritual growth and for the evolution of each and every one of our consciousness. And so you can say, thank you for that next assignment. You don't need to guess what needs to be worked on next. You're being told. And so, if we believe that way, it changes the way we live. Ever since I started living this way, things have been smoother in my life. Now, it doesn't mean that the things don't still happen. Life is still in session, as I like to say. But there's less resistance. When the triggers come up, I can pretty quickly determine what the thing is that it's getting in me, and then I can address it. Whether that be in therapy, with my minister, in prayer, meditation, doing inner child work, whatever it is that works for you. And I can now move through those things much more quickly. And I believe that I am powerfully dismantling those old, worn-out beliefs and limitations that no longer serve me. And freeing myself from so much stuff. Don't you want to be free of that stuff? I feel more free and authentic now than ever before. My life works better when I live this way. And my life will have been better for having lived this way. So ultimately, it's a choice. And you get to decide. close your outer eyes. If that's comfortable, place your feet flat on the floor. Begin to feel yourself sinking into the pew and become aware of your body sitting here. The weight of your body resting on the cushion. The way the ground beneath you rises up to support you. Begin to let go of outer distractions and bring your focus to your center. Taking some deep breaths to help arrive in the present moment, breathing in deeply and releasing slowly. With each breath, letting go more, so breathing in again deeply. And as you release, letting go. One more time, breathing in, filling up the chest and lungs with that beautiful, fresh, life-giving air. And releasing slowly, letting go. Letting yourself sink into the seat, letting yourself be supported. Knowing that you are now in a safe place. In fact, the safest place you could ever be. Alone with yourself. In that place of quiet, that place of relaxation and peace, where we can begin to get acquainted with the truth of who we really are. Not these human doings running around crazy, but a human being. Remembering what it feels like to just be. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. Stop making the lists in your head of what you're going to do later. And just be. This is where we encounter the true self, the higher self, the Christ self. That part that is one with God, one with the universe, one with all things. In this place, we catch a fleeting glimpse of our place in the universe. And we find that we belong. We belong. Right here. As you rest gently in this place, I invite you to receive the words of the mystic Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Let let those words settle over you as you rest for a few moments in the silence. As you gently begin to bring your awareness back to this time and place, think to yourself, whatever comes at me in my life is for my highest good. I don't have to be defensive. I don't have to resist. I can embrace it all. For I know it is all for my spiritual growth and evolution. No one and nothing is against me. In fact, the whole